Welcome to the OrganizedPreneur podcast, where we dive deep into the art of launching and streamlining your podcast and business for growth. I'm your host, Aldreama Harper. With more than 2 decades of experience in the organizing space, transforming chaos into order and launching 3 podcasts, I decided to combine those experiences to share my insider tips and proven strategies so that you can avoid the pitfalls I've had to overcome. So, whether you're just starting out or looking to enhance your existing endeavors, you'll get the knowledge, the tools, and the strategies to work more efficiently when launching your business or your podcast. You ready? Let's go. Welcome to another episode of the OrganizedPreneur podcast. I'm your host, Aldreama Harper, podcast launch strategist, organizing consultant, and business coach to female entrepreneurs, specifically female service based entrepreneurs. And so I'm here to help guide you through some of the complexities, some of the overwhelm, some of the pitfalls and obstacles based on my experience, which in turn helps you in your business because the skills that you're going to acquire during these podcasts are transferable and applicable to various aspects of your business way beyond podcasting. And so you're going to get actionable insight and practical tools that you can apply immediately to launch and grow a successful podcast. And these steps we'll be going through are foundational. They're foundational building blocks to help prepare you for a more successful podcast launch. So, I want you to grab a pen and paper and take notes. But more importantly, I want you to take action because podcasting is not just about creating content. It's not just about getting in front of the microphone. It's about strategically positioning yourself in a competitive market. And so today, we're going to be talking about the 5 major challenges in launching a successful podcast. Now, this episode is based on a question that was submitted by Alexius Cabral, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Alexius. Um, and so, because Alexius asked the question, what are the challenges in launching your podcast? And I'm so glad I don't know if it's a she or he, but I'm so glad Alexius submitted this question because not very many people ask that. And not very many people focus on the challenges. A lot of people talk about all the wonderful, fulfilling things about podcasting. And yes, that is true. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into stats, steps, and strategies to help you launch your podcast with confidence and clarity. And so I want to ask you a question though. Did you know that 75% of podcasts never make it past the 10th episode? That is astonishing. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that I've launched 3 podcasts, and the first one had only 12 episodes. And that's mainly because I lacked clarity, I lacked confidence, I lacked focus, and so I was just doing something that I felt like I would just fall in love with. And I do. But now I don't lack those things because now I have a better understanding of what is required. And so that's why the second podcast was more successful. There are like 400 episodes. And this one, the OrganizedPreneur podcast, way, way more successful because I'm not challenged with that part. Not saying that I don't have challenges, right? But there are challenges and this statistic, this 75% of the podcasters or people who launch podcasts never make it, that is very high. That means like for every 10 podcasts, only 7 excuse me, out of every 10 podcasts, 7 of those podcasts never make it past the 10th episode, right? So, today we're going to cover 5 major challenges in launching a successful podcast. This is for newbie podcasters because the person that I believe submitted this is a newbie podcaster. Now let me say this is not just for newbie podcasters because there are people who also launch podcasts and they get stuck. They get maybe to 25 episodes, or because they're not clear on their audience and they're not clear about the content or where they're trying to go or the purpose of their podcast, then this can happen to you even past 10 episodes. So this is for you as well. But mainly, I don't want you to be in any of those statistics. So let's get into it. All right. So, challenge number 1, defining your niche and audience. Defining your niche and audience. Many new podcasters struggle with finding a clear niche and are all over the place, right? Because you don't know who you want to talk to, you don't know who your audience is, you haven't done the research, you don't know who your target audience is, things like that. That was one of the things that I struggled with as well, so I get it. According to a recent survey, 60% of podcasters attribute early struggles to a lack of clarity in their niche and audience. And so how do you overcome that? What do you have to do, right? So I'm going to give you some, not only am I going to give you the 5 challenges, I'm going to actually give you some ways to overcome those challenges. So how do you overcome the challenge of of struggling with challenge number 1, defining your niche and audience? Now, so many new podcasters. I get these questions all the time, and I can share this from personal experience. Many new podcasters, many people who are looking to launch a podcast struggle with finding a clear niche and being really really clear about their target audience. As a matter of fact, according to a recent survey, 60% of podcasters attribute their struggles to lack of clarity in their niche and audience. Recent had a conversation on one of our um, networking events, and one of the ladies, said she was talking. I asked what was, who was her target audience, and she wasn't clear on it. And I said, you got to get clear before you even start a podcast. This is more important than a microphone. This is more important than the equipment. This is more important than having the software and having everything in place. If you are not clear on your niche and your target audience, you will be in that statistic, that 75% statistic who never make it past 10 episodes. Okay. I don't want that to be you. So, what do you need to do? And so what in on this episode, not only am I going to share the 5 challenges, I'm also going to share with you how to overcome those challenges. So, how do we overcome defining the niche and the audience? Okay. So, there are 2 things I would like for you to do. So, I want you to start, just write it down. Start with identifying your passion and your expertise, and ask yourself, who would benefit most from your content? Who do you think would benefit most from your content? Because it's not about you. It's about the people that you want to serve, especially if you're leveraging your podcast to support your business. If those 2 are going to be coincide, or they're going to coincide with each other, you have got to know this. This is the most important part, right? And so starting with your passion and your expertise and asking yourself who would benefit most from your content. Every one of you who's listening to this podcast at this time, you have a passion, you have expertise. Every one of you have what I define as an intersection between your purpose, your product, your proclivity, and your passion. This is the intersection. This is the sweet spot. And when you identify that sweet spot, you've got to ask yourself who would benefit from this content, right? You may not know initially what it is, but you can find out, figure that out right at that intersection, because it's up to you to discover that. It's up to you to develop it. It's up to you to deploy it, right? And so when you do, when you find that sweet spot, then you ask yourself, who will benefit from listening to this content? Okay. And so with that, you're going to need some tools to help you identify who you're going to serve in that capacity. So you want to use tools like Google Trends, social media insights. Um, I think the one of the I'm trying to think of the name of the actual site. I think it's called Ask the Public or Answer the Public. Forgive me, I don't know which one. Just Google it. But you want to find out what their questions are. One of the things that I share all the time, I do is I look at the feed from any advertising that is geared toward me, and I look at the comments. You can do that. You can look at posts. You can look at just what are the questions that they're asking, right? And then you use that to create a simple persona for your ideal listener. You start there and you craft your content to address those specific needs, right? Don't just start creating stuff with no idea if somebody, is going to like it, or you got to start with getting clear on your niche and defining your target audience. Okay, challenge number 2, overcoming technical challenges. So there are a lot of people who are not technically, that are technically, um, they're tech savvy, okay? Like including, equipment choices and, editing software. All of that can be really daunting for beginners, right? As a matter of fact, there's a statistic that around 50% of new podcasters say that technical issues are a major reason for them delaying their launch. And I can tell you that from talking to a lot of, talking to my clients and talking to people who attend, the events, and just talking to other people in that space, that is something that can hinder you. It can be overwhelming, but there are way too many technological advances out there that can serve you and cut down on that learning curve, right? So, how do you overcome it? Number one, I talked about this in my last episode, but start with the basic. Start with the basic equipment. Start with, a microphone and free editing software. Not only that, there's software that you can use where you hardly have to. All you have to do is just click a button, okay, and it will edit it for you, right? Like Riverside. I mean, and that is actually one of my favorite softwares that can really um, collapse that learning curve, reduce that learning curve. Okay, but there's still some learning you got to do, right? So tip number two is invest in learning. Take advantage either of free tutorials or resources that's available online. Take advantage of those things. And then set aside some time every week to practice, improve your skills. Start with recording and just doing some basic editing. And of course, if you need some guidance on how to get started, I definitely invite you to jump on a strategy call with me. All you have to do is go to chatwithdream.com. But also, if you're serious about launching your podcast, there will be a link in the show notes on how you can actually get on a success strategy call by going to bit.ly podcast launch strategy, pod launch strategy. Sorry, but that will be also in the comment in the show notes. So that's number 2, overcoming the technical challenges. Challenge number 3, content planning and consistency. Now, I can tell you that consistency is a huge problem because I've heard people say, well, where do I get content from? What am I going to do about content, right? And so consistency in content creation is crucial, but sometimes it's a little challenging to maintain, especially if you don't know who you're talking to. If you haven't covered these first two things that and the rest of the things that I'm going to share with you. In fact, stats. There's a stat that says 64% of podcasters who struggle with growth admit they have not maintained a consistent publishing schedule. Okay. So there's your tip right there. You got to create a publishing schedule. Okay. But you got to do that by planning. Okay. And so here are a couple of tips for you. Number one, you want to batch and repurpose content. Batch record episodes to stay ahead of your publishing schedule. I can't tell you how freeing that is. But then you can also use content planning tools like Trello and Airtable. I personally use Notion. These I don't know if Airtable is free, but I know it's one that I've heard people talk about. I know Trello has a free version, and Notion definitely has a free version. And no, Notion is what I use to organize my episodes, and just so I can stay on track. You can use a Google Doc, a spreadsheet, or what have you. Just do some planning so that you can stay consistent. And you want to create like if at all possible, a 3-month calendar plan, right? And commit to a realistic publishing frequency. My episodes are very realistic. Um my episodes publish once a week. Okay. I know that I can stick to that. I'm committed to that. And so every Tuesday is when I have an episode that is going to publish. Okay. So you definitely want to do that, but just batch and repurpose content. When you stick to some type of schedule, you are definitely going to be able to maintain some type of consistency. Okay. Number 4, marketing and growing your audience. Building an audience from scratch is definitely a challenge. It is definitely a challenge. I was having a conversation earlier today about building and growing your audience. And so there are ways that you can do this. And the reality is it does take time, especially when you're doing this organically. So stats show, sorry, that only 20% of new podcasters reach a substantial audience within the first 6 months. That's real. That's real. And here's the thing, this is not a sprint. I'm here to tell you, this is not a sprint. It takes time to build an audience. It takes time to build a business, and it takes time to build a podcast. Okay. So, what are some things you can do? How can you overcome that challenge? The best way I have found is to leverage your existing network, your existing social media channels to promote your podcast. There are, I don't know very many people who are not on social media. I know some, but If you don't have a social media channel or a group that you can get into, or an email list, you may not have an email list, but you have family, you got friends, right? And so, you may be, and that may be some of your, maybe that's a hindrance for you. But I would be I would challenge you to find at least 5 people that would love to support you in your endeavors and help you to grow in that area, right? And so, it- you know, it's doable. This is doable. Okay? I promise you it's not that easy, but it is doable. Another tip is collaboration. Collaborate with other podcasters, get on other podcasts, be a guest on other podcasts, tap into new audiences. This is going to help you to grow and create a loyal audience. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that you do that before you even launch your podcast, right? So I think that that would be the best way to do that. And so implement some type of marketing strategy that includes social media posts. You can let people know that you're getting ready to launch a podcast. People are there to support you. Okay. And you can say, hey, if you want to know when the podcast launch, get on my email list or something like that. Right. And so, but all of these other things have to be in place first. Okay. And if you need help with any of that, again, let's jump on a call. Okay. So, last challenge is number 5, overcoming imposter syndrome. That is a huge one. Many podcasters, did you hear me say many? I said many podcasters feel unqualified. Many business owners, entrepreneurs feel unqualified, not sure if your voice really matters. All of this leads to self-doubt. In fact, that 70% of new podcasters experience imposter syndrome. And I would venture to say that it's probably even higher than that, right? And so what do you do to overcome that? Well, remind yourself that every expert, I don't care who it is, was a beginner. Everybody started at the beginning, right? There's only one you. You have expertise and unique experiences and perspectives, style of presentation. You have everything that you need. You do need to get started though. You got to start at some point. But you have, again, unique experiences and perspectives that no one else has that. I don't care if you're doing the same thing. No one has the exact experience and perspective that you do. The No one has the exact delivery that you do because your experiences are different, right? So focus though on providing value to your listeners. Don't focus on you. Focus on, how can I serve the people that's listening to me, that want this type of content, right? And number 2, so that was number 1, remind yourself that you every expert once a beginner. Number 2, engage with your audience. Ask for feedback. Feedback can help you to reinforce your confidence, even if the feedback is not so wonderful, right? Be open to constructive feedback. I'm one that can tell you that that's difficult for me. However, It's necessary. Okay. And so I would say do that, remind yourself, engage with your audience, but even more importantly, regularly visit and revisit your mission and the reasons why you starting a podcast. That will help you to stay motivated. Always revisit your mission. Why did I start this? Why did I who is it that I want to serve? And I promise you that revisiting your mission and your vision can help you stay motivated. And always be learning and always be leveling up, right? As you're growing. Okay? So, I've shared with you the 5 major challenges that keep you stuck or keep people stuck from launching a podcast. Defining your niche, technical challenges, content planning and consistency, marketing and growing your audience, and overcoming imposter syndrome. So, here's my question, which one resonates with you? And the second part of that question is, what are you going to do to get past that hurdle? What are you going to do to overcome that challenge? Right? So, I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you are interested in closing the gap from between where you are now and where you're trying to go, where you want to go, and how to fill that gap, then I invite you to book a success strategy call with me. On the call, I will share options that's available. And if at that time it makes sense for us to work together, we'll discuss how to move forward. Okay. And so the way you do that is simply go to bit.ly pod launch strategy. That's bit.ly/pod launch strategy. Okay. And so I always like to end with a scripture. And today's scripture comes from 1 John 5:12. This is the New International Version. And it says, whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have the Son of God does not have life. Amen. So thank you for joining me. I hope this has inspired you. I hope these tips have inspired you to transform your business and your life. And I hope that this has encouraged you in some way to get moving, to go ahead and launch that podcast. Go ahead and get your voice out there. Remember those 5 challenges and how you can overcome them. Okay? So until next time, stay organized, stay blessed. Happy podcasting.